Yesterday. Let's be clear. This is not 1970. This is yesterday. Let's see. So the social construct for DEI has been around for quite some time, evolved over the last century into where we are today, starting the suffrage movement, women's rights, and then, of course, the civil rights movement of the 60s, along with gay rights, and then morphing into LGBTQ plus rights. And then we kind of cruise through the 70s with hippie movements, disco in the 80s, hip-hop and house EDM promoted self-expression through the 90s and new millennium. Then a wave of police brutality. Then it was black and brown. No police brutality is as old as the Mayflower. But anyway, then a wave of police brutality and killings culminating in George Floyd being murdered. And then at the same time, or in parallel, Harvey Weinstein, amongst others, were found out, and voila, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, social justice. Stir in a pandemic, and out comes, as you said 4 years ago, the proliferation of DE&I initiatives, not just in the US, but around the world. And so here we are with this conversation. Is DEI under siege? And then, Claudine Gay, the first black president of Harvard, appears to be the poster child for why DEI is a bad idea. And so does her colleague at the University of Pennsylvania. Can't have a woman be president of a university. Things like critical race theory and being woke have been hijacked to mean something completely different than their actual definitions. So President Hardin, it's clear DE&I is under siege. But the question I want to ask all of us, and you all chime in a bit, but I'll start with you, President Hardin, is why is it under siege? Why?
I think it goes back to that pendulum. I think a lot of what we are living through, not just with DE&I being under siege, but just the environment in which we live in today, is part of a larger cultural war. That it wasn't started because of Barack Obama's election in 2008, but it surely was an inflection point. And in history, I believe that there are times where you take two steps forward, and then there is a push. There is a one step back that is taken because to the majority culture, or just the culture in general, that was too far. It was too much. And I think that the only thing that you left off of that list of examples of this movement being under siege is not this part, not even movement, but last year the Supreme Court took away affirmative action in cases. So it's like things that we have fought for decades and decades and decades in this specific moment of the rollback are under siege. And I think that it is, and I don't want to put it all on just the majority culture. We too have to continue to demand that this is important. We too have to be vocal in the fight to say, no, these are still our expectations. I think that, I talk a lot about I govern based off of the Kroger caucus. People stop me in Kroger's and tell me what I'm doing well and what I'm not doing well.
With various levels of intensity.
Yeah. I never have to guess when I'm messing up. Like, Kroger will tell me. But it's amazing how we all have a short attention span on some of the most pressing issues that we're facing, and so that we can't allow for a permission structure that is okay for it to be, for these rollbacks to happen. I think that these type of conversations, by raising it, by saying this part out loud, that no, we saw what you guys did over the last 4 years, and we see you quietly pulling back. We do see that, and we're not okay with it. It has to be a part of the common conversation in every room, and I think that for us, again, I keep going back to the city because that is my purview. Again, the folks who were excited about us doing DEI and establishing this, and it's not just on city council side, the mayor and the administration are doing so too. They hired an amazing DEI manager in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, but making it not a one-off or an event, but something that literally directs all of how the city operates. That's still the gap that we have to fill and have to be expected to fill. And we're now doing this work without people. In 2020, folks were busting out our door saying, why don't you guys have this? Why don't you have this? Why haven't you? Now they're not there saying that anymore.
So, but how do you push on that? Some of us sit on some different university boards, and on one of the boards in particular, we're talking about exactly what you said, the reversal of affirmative action for college admission. That's one piece. But even the language that you are allowed to use as a professor on campus, the language that you're allowed to write your studies, there's all these bars on it. So how do you push on it, aside from voting for different things? What do we do in the meantime to try to turn that back? And then also, you mentioned Barack Obama and that being an inflection point. Is this an inflection point? This whole 4 years ago, okay, DEI matters, let's hire Black and brown people, let's make sure women are in positions, et cetera, et cetera. Is this an inflection point, or is it just kind of...
I think it's only an inflection point, though. That's my point, if we say it is. Like, if we are quiet, if we allow this rollback, then everything that... the Macy incident and everything that we all went through, and the pain of seeing George Floyd and the pain of that reckoning, and all of that will be for naught if we don't continue to speak up now and hold our individual companies accountable, to hold our, and I hate that I keep going back to politics, but at the end of the day, I do think this is all connected. I think some of the things that you're seeing at these universities, especially the state universities, is because they have to answer to elected officials for funding
them,
either in the state houses or in DC. And the more that there is a movement, this cultural war that has been turned into a political war around identity and these identity politics, that is a scary thing that is now being trickled down. Academia used to be a safe space for open thought, for creative thought, this was the one space. But now that everybody is needing to chase, it's not even a negative or pejorative thing. The fact that a lot of them have to get their resources and their direction from political folks now who have political ideologies that are wrapped up in racism and sexism and homophobia, then that now is finding its way all the way down into classrooms. And that is not the fault of teachers. It's not the fault of deans. I know that they don't want, that has been the safe space.
And what's interesting about that, and you were 100% true there, but then you look at the private academic institutions. Harvard's not a state-funded institution. Penn is not. I mean, these are private institutions, but they have a pressure similar. It's a monetary pressure by the donors, and we all saw how that happened over the last kind of 12 months that led to the donors pushing back and saying, we're not funding you, Harvard, anymore. We're taking back our $40 million. Then the institution is again forced to make changes. And by the way, for those of you who think that this is just about getting into a college, higher ed, or a job, being employed as an individual, you talked about, as you said, the video, we talked about D in DEI, but then you properly elocuted on what the E stands for and the I. Yeah. Well, the equity, you mentioned the reversal of the affirmative action in the Supreme Court. Well, the reversal of Roe versus Wade is an equity issue.
100%.
Women don't have the right
100%.
to choose how their body is being, right? And so 100%. This affects every aspect of our daily lives. So
thank you for bringing that point up. And to TC's point, like how you think of diversity, equity, and inclusion can be from your lens of your intersectionality. So like for some folks, for me as an openly queer person, Black queer person, diversity and inclusion means, it has many different facets to it, and how we are showing up and how we are being brought into spaces and made to feel like we belong and are supposed to be there.
But I want you to dig deeper into the political aspect. We are clearly in a nation right now fraught with local, regional, statewide, and especially national politics. Regardless of what side or aisle you're on, it's a crazy situation. In this context, how do you feel, and I know you touched on it, but what hope is there? How do you feel that we'll be able to navigate this with such a polarized political landscape? I mean, I was in D.C. the other day, and I'm not a very politically active person, but I was in D.C. with a bunch of politicals, and these were older folks, men and women, and they were talking about how just 20 years ago, even 12 years ago, Republicans and Democrats, they'd fight all day inside Congress or Senate, but they would hang out afterwards. They'd go to restaurants. Their kids would play with each other. They said that's done. So talk about the bigger role for politics in this social issue?
What I would say, because I think that this is part of the political as well, is again, my belief is that the way that this sticks and the way that this grows and the way that we embed the ideals of diversity, of equity and inclusion into who we are and who we want to be is by understanding that that there is benefits to me to have DEI. And I say that because when you talked about Roe versus Roe v. Wade and you talk about affirmative action, it still could make it seem like this is just for marginalized people. DE&I should matter to straight white men as well, because if they can come after me today, they can come after you tomorrow.
History has proven that.
Because diversity will get to the point where even if you're a straight white man, you might be a straight white man who likes basketball, and we might not be a basketball affirming community at some point.
Listen, white man can jump.
Right. So I think that again, making sure that everybody sees themselves in this space is important. That this is not just for folks who have historically been marginalized. And this is important, and we're all protected when we protect DE&I. Like, this is not just for a segment of the community. On the political point, again, I think that, well, if I am continuing with the pendulum swings, I do think that history has taught us for equal. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So I do think that we are going through a period of time where the pendulum has swung to this extreme, where we have where ideologies are winning the day, and it is based off of culture issues. I think that that does swing back. I think that enough people, and you've seen this. You are seeing this every election now, post Roe v. Wade ruling. Women are being mobilized, energized, and are pushing back. And so I think that the more I think that this does come back. Okay. This does swing back because it has gotten too close to too many.
Sure.
Just yesterday, the Supreme Court in Alabama.
I don't know if y'all heard this news. Listen to this.
Yeah, ruled that in vitro.
So embryos that are fertilized in vitro that you can freeze as a woman or as a couple, and maybe put in your womb later, that they are now deemed as children. And that has massive issues on women who are going through in vitro fertilization right now, because basically it came out that people who accidentally, where those fertilized embryos died, they're being charged for murder.
Think about that. Handling the product and as sensitive as that is.
Yesterday, let's be clear. This is not 1970. This is yesterday.
But before I came here, I was watching the news, and Republicans now are tripping over themselves because that's not a Democrat or Republican issue.
That's right.
Like Republican women down in Alabama have been trying to.
They go through in vitro fertilization as well. Exactly.
All the time. And so this is starting to get close to home to enough folks where there will be a reaction to this. I mean, it is still scary. This is very scary. And I do think that if we're talking about inflection points, this election this year is the inflection point. We do have a decision to make as a community or as a country about who we are and how we want to be. But I also as scary as it gets, and I feel like this year my responsibility is, one, to raise the alarm. I want people to really understand what's at stake. But two, I also want to make people know that it's going to be okay. Sure. And it's hard to do both at the same time. It is scary. What you think is happening is happening. The quiet parts that are being said out loud, it really is that. But we have been here before, and we have won these it sucks to fight old battles. But if we've won them before, we can win them again. We have more faculties, we have more capability, we have more access, we have more education and information than our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents had, and they overcame these things. And so we certainly can and will overcome these as well.
Sure. And I always love listening to when you talk, because, you quote Martin Luther King on various amazing quotes, but you always talk about the arc to progress happens, but it's long. And so we will overcome. I think that's an important message.